Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Generic Garage. On today's episode, we're back on the Shogun. Roll it. Alright, well, I just got through cleaning up the garage a little bit, and I pulled the Shogun forward to give me a bunch of extra space behind it because I need to pull the transmission out of this thing. But before we get into that, a few of you might have noticed that the dash from the Festiva is currently not in the vehicle. So what's going on with that? Well, here is the way everything is looking right now. I've been doing a bunch for the past couple months. You may notice the shifter's sitting in there, the dash is out, there's some extra panels. Lots of stuff has been going on. There's a new 3D printer over there. I've been making parts for this thing, so before we get into why I need to pull the transmission out, let's do a quick overview of what I've been working on over the past couple months. I went over to Home Depot and got myself a big old roll of RAM board, and the RAM board is really nice for making templates that you're then going to use to cut out sheet metal panels. So after I made a bunch of templates, I got a bunch of sheet metal and started cutting it up and making panels for the inside of the car. Now I needed a way to attach all of those panels, so then I started working on making a bunch of these little tabs, and these little tabs are going to have a hole drilled in them, and then I'm going to order a riv nut gun with some riv nuts and install a bunch of those riv nuts in those little tiny brackets, and that way I have a bunch of brackets that I can weld wherever I need to the frame, and I can then just screw in those panels, so those panels will be removable in the future and not be permanently welded to the car. And I like that so that I have access to things and I don't basically weld myself into a corner. So with a whole bunch of those made, I then started looking at how and where I wanted to attach things. But for that big removable panel in the back, I went ahead and just used a bunch of angle iron that I made into a sort of picture frame. That seemed to work the best and is going to enable me to basically make this more or less airtight once I have my panels and some insulation and some thermal barrier of some sort put on. So all of that was going pretty well, and then I started working on the left and the right side holes on either side of the roll cage, and cutting those panels out was a pain, but I think I got them pretty good. Started then working on the left and the right side above the wheels. Again, use some angle iron for the front here, but along the sides is probably where I'm going to start using those tabs. This is a really nice method for doing things because you put everything on there, you put your sheet metal on there and mark it. Christmas came and went, and it was kind of cold, but thankfully I was able to work in the garage. So I started working on that big hole at the bottom of the roll cage and made a panel for that. Got all of that welded in real nice and solid. And I was getting frustrated that the strut in the rear wasn't staying up, so I ordered a new strut and then I installed that. And then I remembered that the mechanism that releases the latch for the rear hatch wasn't working, so I wanted to address that. Before, there was a small plastic clip on there, but it broke when I was taking everything apart. So I took some of my leftover Delrin and I got a bunch of tap and die sets from Harbor Freight and made this little block and threaded it, and now I have a way to open the rear hatch, and it stays open because of the new strut that's in there. So the next big step was to work on shifters and shifter cables. I used some wire and just kind of estimated about the length of the shifter cables that I needed, and then started working on a way to attach those shifter cables to the shifter. So here's a pretty cool look at how that shifter works. When you move it left and right, it moves one cable, and when you move it forward and backwards, it moves another. So I drilled out the old ball studs that were in there, and I got to work cleaning up the shifter. And then I started having to work on how to control everything with my own ball stud attachments that go on the threaded ends of the cables. So here's all of that. All the parts were removed, and well, here's everything greased up and ready to go back in the car, and pretty good example of how I decided to do everything for the shifter cables. It's a little tight in there, but everything's moving freely, and yeah. So there's the cables inside of the car. One of the cables came out perfect. The other one's about an inch or two too long, and the bend radii is a little bit tight for the cable, so I might reorder that one, but it seems like it's gonna work just fine for now. I made a bracket to hold one of the cables that's gonna control one of the movements forward and backward. Figured out exactly where I wanted to put the shifter. Again, installed everything with rib nuts so that everything is removable and not permanent. And then I had to modify this plate because the cable ends were too long and I needed to shift everything away from those ball joints. So here's the modification of that plate that I made. And then I was able to put everything back in the car, and all of the cables you can see are now being held in place where they need to be held. So that's looking really good. And then I got to work on the cable that pulls everything up and down and rotates the bracket that I also had to modify. So essentially, you've got something that rotates it and something that pushes and pulls it. And so here is everything going from first to second to third to fourth to fifth, and then back into reverse. So you can see how that linkage all works with the cables. It's pretty complicated, took me a while. Then I wanted to get the battery put in, so I made a nice little battery tray here. Here it is, turned upside down and then the right way up. And I wanted to put that somewhere in the vehicle that would have easy access. And again, my panels are removable, so changing the battery on this thing's probably gonna be a pain, having to take all the panels off to get to it, but it fits in there pretty nicely. It's out of the way. It's in a really good spot. After that, I needed to move on to holding the air intake hose and the starter relay. So I made a bracket for that. There's my nice little air intake with the MAP sensor. Or is it a MAP sensor? I think there's both on this car. Yeah, so there's that, and there's the relay, and basically the stuff kind of sits where it would have relative to the engine as it was in the show originally. So that actually kind of works out really nice. And there's a lot of room for it over there behind the battery. So everything's hooked up, and I actually got all of the wiring done to the front of the vehicle, and I can start the car with the key now. So then it was on to getting the clutch system figured out and the throttle cable figured out. So I started by modifying the clutch pedal. Here's the modification for that. And then I put the master cylinder in the car right next to the brake booster. And here is a shot of all of that working out. Clutch goes down, really, really nice. And it feels pretty good. And then I installed the throttle cable and all of that's working as well. So then I took the dash out, which was kind of a mistake, but I really needed to do it because we need to get the AC installed. And I noticed that a bunch of the ducting inside of the dash was starting to fall apart or had been chewed through by mice. So I started the effort of doing a lot of 3D scanning and 3D CADing, and then I bought a new 3D printer and started printing out all of the things that I had modeled up to replace all of those broken ducts, because I do want the AC and the defrost and everything like that working in the car. So there's a bunch of the parts that I've printed out. You can see there's one on the seat there, and then there's a main duct, and then the new defrost vent that's been printed out. The other side is just a mirror, so I printed out a mirrored set of that. Here's what it looks like when I scan something, and then send it over to the 3D printer. So here's all of the 3D parts that I printed on the Creality K2 Plus. It's a huge, big old printer. So here's some time lapses from that. Then I moved on to getting the cooling system all plumbed up. I got a bunch of 90-degree bends, and I got my little Davies Craig water pump installed, cut up those aluminum pipes that I had purchased before, ran them all the way to the back, got them plumbed up to the water pump on the passenger side of the motor there, and got a thermo sensor of some sort that came with the pump installed. So I'm gonna have to run some wires to the front for that. Came down the other side and ran everything right back up to the front of the radiator. So why does the transmission need to come out of the Shogun? Well, to put it simply, there is no throw-out bearing inside of the transmission. If y'all recall way back when I was first putting this thing together, I had a bad transmission and a good transmission, and I kind of cobbled the thing together as quickly as I could to get it back on 4 wheels so that I could tow it back to my place and work on it here in the garage. This is the pull type slave cylinder that will be installed on the transmission. I will run a hard brake line from the master cylinder up at the front of the car, underneath the car, all the way back to this thing. And this will sit somewhere around here. It'll go through that hole, and there will be a linkage that connects to, stay right there, that connects to the clutch lever right here. And I need to know exactly where this needs to be installed and how long that linkage needs to be, but without there being a throw-out bearing in there to press up against the clutch forks, I have no idea how to make any of that. So I gotta pull the transmission out, install the thrust bearing, put it back together, and then I'll know exactly where the little clutch lever is gonna be sitting at so that I can install the slave cylinder in the right location and then get all of that working. And the cool thing is, once all that is done, I can throw the AC components up in there, put the dash back on, hook everything back up, and I should be able to pull the truck out of the driveway, open the garage door, let the Shogun down, and then pull this thing out into the street, fire it up, and see if it'll move under its own power, and maybe take it around the block real quick and then pull it back into the garage. So I don't know if we're gonna get to that point on this episode. I wanna try to release something here pretty quick, but right now we gotta get that transmission out of that car. So here we go. Well, I didn't get the transmission completely out of the car, and I think that's actually a good idea. I was kind of hanging up over here on the side where the transmission mounts up to, and I could probably pick up the transmission a little bit and finagle it out of there, but I think I can do what I need to do with the transmission sitting right where it is. I need to remove the clutch release bearing out of there. And then I started thinking and considering what I could do while the transmission was sitting in this position. And maybe now is the time to just go ahead and put a new clutch in it. There was a recall on the 89 to 90 shows, if I recall correctly, where there was a 9¼ inch clutch and it was burning up after like 10,000 miles. So they did a recall and pulled those clutches out and put a new 9¾ inch clutch in there. From what I can tell, this has the thicker pressure plate that is the same diameter as the flywheel. So that tells me this should be a 9¾ updated clutch setup. It has the Rev B throwout bearing in there, and the Rev A's initially just had the throwout bearing riding on the aluminum housing for that input shaft. So what they did for Rev B was they put like a steel shim around, or like a steel sleeve around the aluminum part of that input shaft housing, and then the throwout bearing rides on that. So there's one bolt that I need to remove to slide that whole thing out, but you can see here, if I get the right angle, that little bolt head on there, and then as you actuate the lever for the clutch, it pushes that throwout bearing in and out. So remove the one bolt there and the whole thing should slide out. And then I don't think the clutch was actually bad when I put this all together, but I mean, now's kind of the time to just throw a clutch in this thing. That way we don't have to do it in the future. I don't think we need to do like an updated or an upgraded stage 1, stage 2 clutch. The thing's just gonna put out stock horsepower and torque for right now. So just a regular replacement stock clutch should do the trick. So let me get on the internet and head over to ShowSource and get all of that stuff ordered and ask a couple questions, and then we'll be right back. All right, well, another week has passed and I've got a bunch of parts sitting here now from Rock Auto, and let's just kind of go over what I decided to order. So sitting over here, we have a brand new clutch and oil pan gaskets and gasket maker. I went ahead and got some new lower control arms because the ball joints on these old ones are kind of worn out and the boots are gone. And then I started looking at CV axles and decided, well, now that we've got this apart, now's a good time to do CV axles. So those should actually be here tomorrow, as well as the rest of the tie rod ends. Speaking of the tie rod ends, I went ahead and removed the steering rack. So now I need to develop a way to hold those tie rods in place without the steering rack being in there. So I'll have to jump into that. I got the oil pan taken out there, and they say when you do the clutch, go ahead and do the rear main seal, and then there's a plate on the back there that needs to come off that kind of makes the whole thing a lot easier. So there's another gasket in the kit to do that plate gasket thing. We'll get into that. Let's see, included with the clutch is the new throwout bearing. I got the old one off. It's, well, half of it, the other half wasn't really even in there, but we're gonna have to throw that in, so that's all good to go. And then I spent a good day with the pressure washer and some paper towels and some razor blades and got the oil pan all nice and clean. While the car has been sitting here, it's been slowly leaking something, and I don't know whether it's oil, transmission fluid, power steering fluid, something, but it's really hard to tell where it's coming from with everything being so dirty. If you remember when we took this engine apart, the case on the transmission, on the bad transmission, had basically exploded. And so it might just be that there was a bunch of transmission fluid covering everything, and over time gravity was just kind of letting it flow down and slowly drip off everything. So just to make sure we don't have a valve cover gasket leak or something like that, got everything real nice and clean so that if something does leak in the future, we can trace the drip all the way back up and see exactly where it's coming from. So let's go ahead and get the clutch out of here, get that plate off, start replacing it with the new stuff. Then we can get the oil pan and the gaskets all put back in and get the bottom of the motor put back together. And then we can throw the transmission back on with the new throwout bearing and get everything remounted in here. And then tomorrow, as soon as the new CV axles get here and the rest of the tie rod stuff, we'll throw the rest of the wheel assemblies, whatever you want to call them, the suspension components, all of that stuff back in. But first, we got to get the bottom of the motor put back together here. So here we go.
right, well, the transmission is connected back to the engine and it's all put back together in the car. And as you just saw, I started working on taking the steering rack apart. The reason for that is because the threads that are on the end of the tie rods are a 15/16 by 20 thread per inch thread. And I'll be danged if I can't find a bolt or some threaded rod or something to match up with that. So here's the plan. I have the steering rack back in the car now with the tie rods off. You can see here on this side, the threads are sticking out. And I've done this because I need to know exactly where to build some mounts for those tie rods to attach to. I think the plan is I'm gonna put it all kind of back together, attach the tie rods, do some measurements, maybe take some 3D scans, and then I'll know exactly where the rod that's inside that steering shaft or that steering rack needs to be located. Once I have that, I can build some plates and we can take that shaft out of the steering rack and we'll use those threaded ends to connect the tie rods, but that whole shaft will be like welded in place exactly where it would be as if the steering rack was still in the car. And then we'll just cut the center of the shaft out, which will just leave us the two ends that are threaded to attach our tie rods to, and then we can remove the rest of the steering rack. So right now, I'm gonna try to put all of this kind of stuff back together with the new parts. I may or may not throw the new CV axles in. I didn't order the bearing, what would you call them, the bearing seals that go on the knuckles. And so I'm a little afraid if I go pushing out those CV axles, I may be in a position where I need to now get bearings and bearing seals for the knuckles, which is more time waiting. But right now, if I leave it as it is, I can put it all back together and we can get the tie rods positioned where they need to be and get everything kind of put back together and drop it back down on the ground and kind of move forward from there. And if I need to do CV axles in the future, we have them. And they're not too difficult to do, but at least the car will be back together. I could do those CV axles at a later point and then order the seals if I need to. So let's figure out how to get these tie rods attached back to the steering rack and figure out some sort of bracketry to hold that rod that's in the steering rack so that then we can cut that up, get it all welded in place, and remove the rest of the steering rack out of the car. right, well, apparently there was a lot more that I needed to do in order to get this thing ready to test drive than I had originally thought. But I think we're right at about that point where we can open up the garage door, get this thing off the jack stands, and take it around the block real quick. I'm not too sure about the brakes. They do go to the floor, but there is resistance right towards the end. I am not sure if the master cylinder is big enough to supply all of the disc brake calipers from the Taurus with all of the fluid that they need. So I think what might be going on is that I need to get a bigger master cylinder with a bigger bore so that I can push more fluid to the brakes. I tried bleeding them like 3 or 4 times. I even had a vacuum bleeder somewhere up over there, yeah. And that didn't seem to help too much because as you undo those little vacuum bleed screws, air can get sucked in where the threads are, and you think you have bubbles, but you don't, but maybe you do, you never know. I don't know, I probably need to get it over to like a friend's dealership place or something and see if they can't pressure bleed it, but I'm pretty sure I'm gonna end up needing a bigger master cylinder. However, for now, I think they're gonna be good enough to stop. We're not going out on the main roads. We're just gonna go around the neighborhood real quick. Everything that's been done, well, you saw in the montage there, we got the steering rack all figured out. I didn't end up cutting out the middle bar on that thing. We just left it in there for now. When I went to put coolant in the system, apparently the water pump seal was bad, so I took the water pump off, and that was a whole other can of worms that I didn't mean to get into, but it was kind of a blessing in disguise because we found out that I needed a timing belt and I needed new O-rings and new gaskets for a bunch of things. You saw me do all of that. Then I started working on the dash. I got all the AC components cleaned up and revamped, so now the whole dash is all cleaned up and ready to go. You can see we got the Davies Craig water pump system thing set up there. The radiator fan is still operating off of the original ECU that comes with the Taurus. I want to see if that thing will work because I think it has variable speed control for the fan that's in there. I still need to get hoses made for the AC, and I still need to see if I need to hook up the AC button to some sort of relay to kick the fan on. So there's like 3 different things that can control that radiator fan: the ECU for the engine, the water pump controller, and the AC button, so that when the AC turns on, obviously the fan needs to turn on. So I still got to figure that out, but basically we knocked off pretty much every important thing on this list. Yeah, steering rack, secured the gas tank, we got the slave cylinder and the master working. The slave cylinder is a little bit janky. As you saw in the video, it flexes the plate that I made, and I probably just need to undo that plate and mount it directly to the transmission through that hole. I don't know, I'm gonna have to take a look at that later, but for now I know that it works. It's separating the engine from the transmission. I had fired it up to test it to make sure I didn't have any water leaks in the coolant system anymore after I put everything back together, and everything seemed fine, so I pushed on the clutch, put it into gear. The wheel spun, pushed on the clutch, pushed on the brakes, the wheels stopped, so I'm fairly certain everything's just gonna work out here. Here's hoping, but let's see, I definitely bled the brakes again. I got the trans topped off. I did an oil filter and oil swap on it. All the AC stuff was installed. I did put an oil gauge on the back. It's on the back where the motor is, right there, because I do not have enough copper line to go all the way to the front of the car, which I want to do eventually, but I might leave that one there, run a T, and then run a separate gauge up to the front so that I have gauges in 2 places. Seems kind of dumb, but be nice to know that I have oil pressure if I'm back there messing with the motor. I did a bunch of 3D printing. That was pretty cool. We got some clamps underneath the car so that all of the hoses and lines are held up, all the gas lines, the brake lines, so on and so forth, are held up under the car. The throttle cable is like from a go-kart or something. It's like a 10-foot long, 12-foot long throttle cable for a go-kart, and you would figure that that would work pretty well, but it's really stiff. The gas pedal is actually like almost as hard as the brake pedal. It almost feels like a clutch pedal, so I think I probably need to order an actual throttle cable for that thing, kind of like I did with the shifter cables for the transmission. So we'll get back into that at some point, I'm sure. That'll be fun. I probably need to adjust the rear springs a little bit. As soon as we let the car down, I'll see how the ride height looks, and then based on that, I'll probably turn them up a little bit so the back end is up a little bit higher, so that if I go over any bumps, I don't want those wheels rubbing on the wheel wells. Eventually we will be cutting those out. I've been planning out how we're gonna do the body kit for this thing, and looking at filaments. We're probably gonna use ASA instead of ABS. All of the wires have been zip tied up and kind of shoved wherever and held in place so that nothing shorts out and burns down the car. I still need to do a battery hold down. That's something that needs to be done, but like I said, we're not going out on the streets. We're not gonna go very fast and try to whip this thing around corners or anything, so it should be fine where it's at right now. The cables are kind of holding it down anyway. I still need to make an ECU box. For right now, it's just kind of zip tied in there. Other than that, the coolant pipes are held up. They should be fine. And new water pump, change the timing belt, make sure all that was good. So I think what we're gonna do now is go ahead and let the car down and fire it up and pull it out of the garage and see if we can stop on the incline driveway. And if that works, we'll take it around the neighborhood real quick. So fingers crossed. Here we go. I got y'all mounted on the GoPro on my head so you can see what I'm seeing. Did a couple of last minute checks. I think everything's gonna be okay. Got some ear protection because this thing is gonna be loud. And I don't have a fire extinguisher, but I do have a big old bottle of water down there. So let's see, I got my license. I think we're ready to open up the garage door and give this thing a test. Let's see how this goes. All right. No seat belts. Let's see, can I push the clutch? Move the seat up a little bit here. All right. Ear protection in. Adjust the mirror. There we go. No side mirrors installed, but we have those. Let's see if this works. Fuel pump works. We're in neutral. Brake is on. Oop, a little loud. First gear. Brakes. We have brakes. I think my roommate's gonna follow me here. Yeah, we got brakes. They suck, but we got brakes. Ooh. On the wheel wells in the front. Ah! Sounds terrible. Running a little rough. It's kind of misfiring. I probably need to hook up the check engine light, see if we're throwing any codes. I definitely need to raise the springs in the front. Smoky in here. think we're burning off some stuff. Holy crap. Oh yeah, I left the light on. Okay. Very, very smoky. I think we'll stand out here for a minute. Okay, so first impressions. This thing's gonna be very, very quick once I get it all figured out. Something's definitely going on with the motor. I don't know if it's still relearning. Maybe the computer needs to figure stuff out. Maybe I've got a vacuum leak. I don't know how my timing could be off, but maybe it is somehow. Again, I don't know if the oil pressure was there. The vacuum line's good, the brakes worked, and we're rubbing. We're definitely rubbing. I want to say on this front tire up here. I could smell it and I could hear it, yeah. Oh yeah, that's definitely rubbing, so I need to jack this back up a bit. I think it was only this one though, because of that dent, but I need to jack it back up again and raise the springs. This one doesn't seem to have any wear marks on it, so I think it's just that front one over here. So we'll have to adjust that. That gas pedal is really hard to push down. It was a little hard to control the throttle. The brakes, despite being mushy, at least they were all there. So that's good. It's really loud. I need to get an engine cover plate put back up on there and figure the rest of that out. But as far as like a first test goes, that was really nice. I'm seeing discoloration between these two. That's interesting. That one's got a darker color than that one, so I think we might have a dead cylinder or something going on in the back half of the motor. I might pull out the laser thermometer and check that out. I don't know if y'all can see it or not, but this one's definitely a darker color than this one, so I think this one was getting hotter than this one. Not sure why that would be. Probably need to think about that a little bit. If y'all have any ideas, let me know. Y'all did hear it backfiring and sputtering. And that's interesting that one bank, the front bank, is getting hotter than the rear bank. So maybe something's running too rich. Maybe something's running too lean. I probably need to check my fuel pressure regulator and make sure my fuel pressure is good. And maybe get the check engine light and do some self-diagnostics on this thing, but well, I had number 5 and number 6 backwards on the coil pack. Just had to swap those two. Now everything's fine. Runs perfectly. Lesson learned. So yeah. Hey, you know what? We made it around the neighborhood. It felt very strange. It didn't feel very secure. It was not comfortable driving it at all. So there's a lot to address, but the point is, it runs and it drives and it can move under its own power and it stops. And I think this is a great place to end this episode. We did it. It's running. Y'all heard everything that I heard. You saw everything that I saw. I'm probably gonna jack up the front end a little bit and adjust those springs and maybe take it around the block again. I don't know, we'll see. Hopefully the computer does some learning or something. Maybe it's just trying to figure itself out. Maybe we got a bad injector, bad wire, bad plug, something maybe going on. Need to hook up that check engine light. Anyways, guys, I appreciate your patience. Thank you for sticking with me for as long as you did. I know this has been a long episode, but there was a lot that I wanted to get done, and it's been about 6 months since the last video. So I wanted to make sure I got everything in the video that I wanted to get in, and I wanted the car to be running in this video and driving, and we did it. So thank you so much. If you're still here and you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. It's completely free. It helps me out. You don't have to pay for anything. You literally just click the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, give me a like, leave me a comment, tell me what you think. If you got some diagnostic insights, let me know. Help me by just doing any one of those things that are free. I don't have a Patreon or anything like that. I'm not making any money off of any of this. This is just for fun. It's a hobby. It's in my free time. And I really appreciate it. Shout out to the UPS guy. Thanks for delivering all the packages from Rock Auto. And shout out to the FordFestiva.com group. Y'all have been really supportive and liking all the posts that I put on there. And if you're here from there, leave me a comment. I really appreciate it. I'll catch you guys on the next one. And until then, y'all stay safe. Have a great day, and bye.